Good evening. I'd like to call the work session meeting of Monday, February 27th to order. With the absence of the mayor. Well, first we want to do roll call, don't we, Al? Let's do roll call. See if we have an absence.
Brunig.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Maibaum.
Present.
Schramm.
Here.
Villanueva.
Present.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denherter.
Here.
Thank you. In the absence of a mayor, we need to have you, commissioners, elect a mayor pro tem to serve in her stead for the work session. So would take any motions for nomination for mayor pro tem.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Nathan Johnson to serve as mayor pro tem for this meeting.
Second that motion.
So motion by Schramm and a second by Villanueva. Do we do a roll call vote for that, Al?
I believe so.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Unless there's discussion.
And it's interesting because now we're starting with Johnson tonight.
Okay.
Aye.
Where's the pause? Are you thinking about it? Maibaum.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. We'll let you get set up here, and I'm going to head over to the podium.
Well, thank you for your confidence, everyone. This is the time for public appearances, so if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission about an item not on tonight's agenda, please step to the podium. Seeing no movement, we will move on to our main business of this evening, and that is a review and discussion of City of Yankton Personnel Policy Handbook. So I will hand it over to the city manager.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem and members of the commission. I have with me our Director of Human Resources and Employee Engagement, Brittany Orr. I think you all know Brittany. And she's going to help tonight walk through the changes. So our personnel manual and policy handbook is applicable for all employees at the City of Yankton. And you all know that day-to-day, administratively, myself and the department heads manage and work with the employees. This handbook also applies to Al and I and our conduct, as well as to Ross. And so wanted to bring that forward, but also let you know that why we've had to make some changes. First of all, I think it was probably 5 years or more ago since we've updated our personnel policy handbook, and the world's changed a lot. The working world has changed a lot since then, and so we needed to make some changes. We've had some changes in state law as well, and so we wanted to make sure we were being reflective of the changes that were in state law. We also have had some renegotiations with our two labor unions. So we have the AFSCME union, as well as now the Fraternal Order of Police. So we want to make sure that all of these negotiated terms were put into or consistent with what was in the personnel policy manual. So this evening, Brittany and I would like to go through the changes, the major changes, see what questions you have, what discussion comes up for you, and what things you might be curious about, thinking that you might not be familiar with what had changed if we just present it to you at a regular meeting. Our hope this evening is that we get your feedback and questions, and that we bring this back to you under a regular meeting agenda to approve, because it does require resolution authorization before it is in effect. So the other thing that I wanted to mention to you all is that this is in draft form, so we have had an attorney who specializes in law, in employment law review this, so they've made some changes. Certainly, if you have some suggestions or ideas, we can talk about those as well. Also, once it is adopted by the City Commission, we, of course, make it available to the public, as well as, first and foremost, to our employees. And they are asked to sign an acknowledgement that they have access to it, that they have the opportunity to read it. We don't go and print 147 of them, knowing that they probably, not everybody wants a copy, but we do make copies available if someone does want a copy, a hard copy. And we also make sure everyone understands where they can find it so that they know the terms under which we consider sort of the guidelines for conduct and behavior. It also should be stated that this does not supersede the union agreement. So where somebody is a represented employee, that is where we look first, and then we go to the personnel policy manual. So there should not be inconsistencies in the personnel policy manual. However, there are some things that are addressed in the bargaining agreements that are not addressed in the personnel policy manual, or they're addressed differently. One that comes to mind, for example, is we have a different probationary period for law enforcement, which is in the FOP agreement, than we do in the personnel policy manual. So in that regard, the represented employees of the FOP would be tied to that requirement, not to what's in the policy personnel manual. So want to bring that forward so people understand how that works. We have about, I want to say, and Brittany, maybe you can help me, about 80 employees that are represented by AFSCME, and about 20 that are or 25 that are represented by the FOP, approximate numbers. The rest of us are not considered represented employees, and so our guidelines are solely based in this personnel policy manual. So with that, Brittany, I'll let you start off talking through with the commission for some changes. Please stop us if you have questions or want to talk about something further.
So one of the first changes that we would like to talk about is the personal days. So depending on how the Christmas Eve falls each year, if it falls on a weekend, that year, an extra 8 hours of personal days are allotted to the employees. So for example, this year in 2023, Christmas Eve is on a weekend. So this year, our employees receive 4 8-hour holidays. So what we are looking to do is when an employee is brought on and newly hired, prior to this year, they would get all 4 holidays, even if they're brought on December 27th. So now they have to use all 4 personal days before the end of the year and they lose them. So we're going to prorate depending on which quarter they are hired, that's how many holidays they will receive. So this year, when they have 4 holidays, if they're hired in the first quarter, they will receive all 4. On years when we only have 3 holidays, they'll receive all 3. Then the second quarter, when we have 4 holidays, they'll receive 3. When we have 3 holidays, they'll receive 2. So forth, so on, till we get to the fourth quarter. If we have 4 holidays, they'll still receive 1. On the years when we only have 3 8-hour holidays, they won't receive any in that fourth quarter. But then starting the following year, then they would receive all 3 or 4, depending on that year, what that Christmas Eve holiday does.
And I think, Brittany, that was a suggestion that came from supervisors and managers saying, and the unions, both unions were okay with that. A lot of folks hold their personal days. We kind of wait to see, what happens throughout the year, but also it's really difficult if someone starts in December or November, scheduling wise, to make sure everyone gets their 4 or 3 holidays in. And so prorating them seemed like a good idea, and I think the employees received that well.
Yeah. The drug policy, so that's not something new that I have came up with. That was actually a memorandum back from 2021 that the commission at that time approved that. So all we did was implement that policy into the manual. The big change, I think, back in 2021 when that was approved, was with the addition of marijuana use. So what does that look like for our drug policy? So that is drafted into the drug policy. That is on personnel manual. If you scroll to pages 49 through 53, you can see all of those. So it addresses when testing happens, the different circumstances when those are going to be required based on incidents that maybe have happened, random drug testing, CDL, and then how those fall, what that looks like for a negative drug test based on prescription and all of that. So that is indicated in those 4 or 5 pages there. Again, that's all information that came back in June 22nd of 2021 was when that was presented.
I think because it hasn't been, we're currently operating under that, but it has not been incorporated into the policy manual. So we want to make sure we educate our employees. Another thing I feel like that language does that our previous drug policy didn't is talk about being intoxicated. So whether you have a prescription or not, if there's suspicion of someone being intoxicated or there's, issue with drugs or alcohol, we can certainly ask that they have a test at Yankton Medical Clinic, and we have folks obviously on staff who can help us make those determinations as to whether intoxication is present.
Any questions on that one? All right, the next one that we'll talk about is the vacation hold. So prior to this time, when a new employee is brought on, there's a 6-month probationary hold where they are not able to use their vacation. Their vacation time accrues, but they cannot use it. They are allowed to use accrued sick leave. And so we, as in an effort to try to be a more attractive place to work, it's kind of hard for an employee to come on in here. You have no time off, besides the personal days. You cannot access any of your vacation time. That can sometimes be a little bit scary for some employees that maybe have young kids or things like that, where they know they're probably going to need to use some of that time. So in an effort to be kind of a more attractive employee, a little more employer, we have removed that vacation hold. So now when you come on, you start accruing right away. You can use just what you've accrued at any point. So if you accrue your first payroll, you accrue 3.08 hours, and the next day you need to use 2 hours of it, it's there for you right away.
You still have to have your supervisor's approval, of course, has to work in with the schedule. Some of these changes, as Brittany alluded to, are the fact that we also want to be an attractive employer. And so we're trying to do a few things that, seem like, yes, there was a reason for the policy, but we know now as managers, we hope people stay 30 or 40 years, but we know they won't. So typically now. So we also need to make it attractive when people are deciding whether or not to come to work with us. Most of the hires we've done, I think, in the last year or so, there's been things that people say, oh, well, this vacation hold was going to be tough for me because I have a vacation planned with my family, or I have this I already know I'm going to be. So we put that in their offer agreement anyway. So I think this is really how we're operating on an individual basis. So now it'll just be something that everyone understands.
Next, the workers' compensation and the FMLA, that was kind of revised and redone back in April of 2022. So now incorporating that into the personnel manual, similar to that drug policy where that's what we've been practicing, but now it's in there. And so there was some changes. Again, the same company that specializes in employment law had done those 2 policies for us. So those were drafted back for us back in April or May of 2022. So again, what we've been practicing the last 7-8 months, but now it will be nice to have everything all in one place so that when employees come to us, we can say, yep, it's on this page in the employee manual, rather than let me get you that policy, it's not in the manual, and just get everything together. So it's a lot easier for employees to have access to all of that at one time.
The biggest change on work comp, Brittany, is the 90 versus 30 days. Do you want to explain that?
So we mirrored that to the FOP. So prior, we were doing a 90-day, if somebody is out and they cannot work, the city work comp covers 2/3 of their pay, and the city covered the other 1/3 for up to 90 days. In some discussions with some of these lawyers that specialize in that, they said that's a very extremely generous policy to have. The FOP went with 30 days. We presented it to the union with 30 days, and they agreed to that with the AFSCME union. So the work comp will cover 2/3. The city will cover the other 1/3 of their pay for 30 days. After 30 days, that 1/3 of their own pay will need to be supplemented with sick or vacation or comp time or their personal days. So they're still able to realize the 100% paycheck. Now but they do have to use some of their own time. Their benefits, sick, vacation, will continue to accrue as long as they have paid leave. Benefits don't accrue when you're not having a paid leave. So once it becomes unpaid, there's no benefits that accrue. So as long as they're still paid, they have enough vacation and sick time to cover that 1/3, their benefits will continue to accrue.
I can take on there are a couple easy ones here to knock out. So we made some changes in terms of our reimbursement for boots. So a lot of our employees, just due to the nature of their work, have the need to have steel toe boots or reinforced soles on their boots. Our folks at the transfer station, for example, can get involved in things piercing up through their boots and things of that nature. And so we do have a policy for that. That hadn't been updated, at least since I had been here, on the dollar amount, and so we changed that to make it reflect a little more the cost of doing business and purchasing the pair of boots. We also wanted to be consistent across the board with all employees for that. So we had different for police. We were doing something different for police than we were for some of our other employees, and that didn't make sense for us anymore. So we thought, let's make it all the same amount. Also, safety glasses, we used to limit that amount. We still do limit it, but I think it was at, do you remember the exact amount, Brittany? $60 for a pair of prescription safety glasses. That doesn't go very far when you're buying those types of things. So we upped that to $100 for safety glasses. So those folks that need those, we can make sure that they have the right equipment. I haven't heard anything on safety readers yet, but maybe they'll add that for me. Also, I can probably take the addition of the 3 Fraternal Order of Police members on the Health Insurance Committee, and I just wanted to talk about this sort of at our work session so everyone understands how we arrive at that recommendation for you. So within both of the contracts, we have a Health Insurance Committee that's comprised of 3 FOP members, 3 AFSCME union members, and 3 non-represented employees. So 9 folks, and then Brittany serves as the sort of chair of that committee, and they develop a recommendation for me to take to you based on our rates, based on the types of coverage. Most recently this year, you'll remember that we were able to get a locked-in rate with our current provider because of some of the wellness things that we've done. And so that was out cost savings for the city, as well as a benefit, we think, for the employees. We're now implementing some of the other strategies brought forward, which include some additions to our mental health program. So Brittany and Colleen are putting together some programming for employees that can be attended or can also be attended later, watching them online in relation to different topics that we hear about from employees that they're interested in, or also we think are important for employees. Also included that are some actual trainings for supervisors to talk about some of these topics that we maybe didn't talk about so readily in the workplace before, but are really important now when it comes to mental health.
There's some just small language changes with a couple years ago with the implementation of UKG. The payroll processing moved from finance to HR. So there's a lot of just little changes on who you need to report things to. We had a lot of stuff in there that said on your time card, because we used to have paper time cards. Now all of that stuff is within a software. So there's a lot of changes just with small language on please report to the Human Resource Department, or please make a timesheet note rather than on the back of your time card, that type of stuff. So there's a lot of those little languages just to reflect how we currently operate. There was an addition of a length of time that somebody can use bereavement leave. So we do have a bereavement leave policy. Before it was open-ended. So there was nothing in there stating that you had to use it within a certain length of time. It was settled on with the union to have a 1-year length of time. So kind of with COVID, we've seen that sometimes funerals don't happen immediately. Maybe burials are at a later time, that type of thing. So 1 year kind of made sense for the bereavement leave. And then we did add language regarding benefits while on leave of absences. So kind of what I was referring to earlier, we didn't have any language in there if somebody has an unpaid leave of absence. So for example, they have an 80-hour pay period, they're working 40 of those hours, the other 40 are unpaid. We now have language in there that says that they will be responsible for the cost of their benefits proportional to the amount of time that they work that pay period. So if they're working 50% of it and 50% of it is unpaid, 50% of the cost of their side of the benefits, they will have to pay. So it gets a little bit, it holds employees accountable to keep track of, getting their time accrued and maybe not just blowing through it, taking unpaid time, and then still having all of their benefits covered by the city. So that was something that was done with, in negotiations with the union. And then we did have a small language change regarding longevity pay. So as you know, new employees or employees hired after 2012, they won't get the longevity pay till they're at 25 years. There was some confusion. The people that had it before were thinking that they were still allowed to kind of progress from the 250, 350, 450, 550. So we've added language in there that you're frozen at that amount until you get to your 25 years. So the employees that currently have it, that had it prior to 2012, they're frozen at their spot. Once they hit their 25 years, they automatically go to that 650 spot. So very small language change, but we've had issues where there's needed to be clarification, so trying to provide that within the manual for them. And then one other thing that was a bigger change was the removal of a 1-week notice for schedule changes. So it used to be you couldn't come to your supervisor and say, hey, my son's baseball schedule last night got rained out. They're playing tonight. Can I work through my lunch so I can leave early? Before it was either a no or you're going to have to use vacation time. Now we've removed that 1-week notice. And so now that could be something that you realize. Again, as long as the supervisor approves it and you're in communication with them, as long as it's mutually agreed upon between the employee and the supervisor, the supervisors and employees now have that flexibility to be able to make those schedule changes.
And I believe we also did away with the form. So back in the day, somebody filled out a piece of paper, and then a piece of paper, for example, went from the street shop to Brooke, and then from Brooke to Corey, and Corey to Adam, and Adam to me, or to Jean, and Jean to me, and then I didn't know what to do with it after I signed it. So there was a lot of passing of paper around and photocopying paper and signing things for the sake of signing them. And so, we felt that we trust our employees to know, to say, hey, can I be flexible? And we trust our supervisors to be earnest with them when, if it's okay with the schedule and they're not on a paving crew or they're not something already, that they can be, flexible with the employees. We haven't had any issue like that. So that did away with a lot of the paper shuffling.
FMLA, again, that was something that was revised back several months ago that we've been practicing. So now just have that formal language. They cleaned it up a lot and make it pretty easy. We've put together also a flow chart. So now we can give those to supervisors. Okay, somebody has a work injury. Here's what you need to do. There's not a ton of steps, but it is important that we follow them in the right order. So getting that information out. And then obviously there was some stuff missing in the policy by law that needs to be in there. So that was all cleaned up back when they redid that in April or May.
And I think one of the nice things about going through this change in the personnel policy handbook is we all realized, Brittany and I realized that we have to do a better job, and we have done a better job since we started working on this, on making sure people understand what's applicable for FMLA. We spent quite a bit of time with the employment loss folks, and Ross was helping with us as well to understand, it's not something that it's a right that you have. And, I don't know that everyone looked at that in the same way. But there's, it's protecting both the employer and the employee. And when you approach it from that aspect, it's really something that we want to make our employees informed and our supervisors informed about. And so people understand when FMLA should be offered. We also have a little guide or cheat sheet we can give supervisors that they can, kind of take a quick look at if they get inquiries. And they can also, of course, always go and speak with Brittany, but it's important for everyone to know that. There's been times looking back that we can say we didn't have somebody on FMLA, or we didn't, they didn't choose FMLA. That's how we kind of looked at it before. Should have been. It would have protected them and would have protected the city as an employer. So we know a little more now. So when we know better, we do a little better. So we're doing better now.
We changed small language for on-call pay. It used to say 1 hour of on-call pay per day of being on call. And a day is hard to figure exactly when you have some people that maybe work multiple times in the day. So you might have dispatch that comes in till 6 a.m., they leave, and they come back at 6 p.m. So what does that look like? So we have changed that now to say 1 hour per 24-hour period. So that was, again, a small language change, but clarified exactly how that will work. And then we have guaranteed for any internal city employees that apply for an internal position, they will be guaranteed an interview. So we heard from the union that was something that they wanted, was that they felt that maybe internal candidates weren't getting the chance to interview for positions, and so that was kind of an easy switch. I think in practice, at least since I've been on board in the HR role, that has been the practice, that if an internal candidate applies, we give them an interview. So this just now, it's stated in the contract that now that will be something that will be required to do. We changed the language of that where grievances need to be filed. I think before they were in the city manager's office, so now they'll be, all of those will be in the human resource department. We've provided some language that the city will provide any employee that works in the right-of-way 2 safety shirts, high visibility safety shirts per year. If one of those safety shirts is destroyed or not necessarily destroyed, but maybe it's ripped because in their line of work, something has happened, they can bring that back to us up in the human resource department, and we will get them a new one. Colleen has been fantastic at running around, getting everybody's sizes. I think she ordered from 3 different companies because that was what our employees wanted. So wide variety of different options. There was t-shirts, long sleeves, sweatshirts, some zip, some pullover. There was different requirements for if they would ever be wearing them at night. They have to have the reflective strip on their sleeve. So she took this part of it and has run with it, and it's been really helpful because she is great with that sort of thing. So that's something that's already implemented. Those came in within the last couple of weeks, the first round of order of that. So we still have some on back order, but she's gotten those out to most of the departments.
I'll take the frequency of the safety committee meetings because it's one of the easy ones. So, our original AFSCME bargaining agreement, we had a monthly safety meeting. So we have a safety committee comprised of FOP members, AFSCME members, and non-represented members, and we're meeting monthly. They have a safety manual that we abide by, which is updated every few years as well. It's one of the foundations of having that platinum safety level with the state of South Dakota pool. And so, it's important to all of us. The meetings, monthly meetings, became a little too frequent. What happens at those meetings is, of course, we discuss any safety issues that may have been brought in by employees to the committee members themselves. We also discuss in a way the safety sort of incidents we've had. So, if there's a ladder fall or, something like that, that's discussed in terms of the incident, not in terms of the personnel, but, if there's improvements that we can make in our work to be more safe. But it really got to be too frequent, and sometimes there wasn't anything to discuss, fortunately. So we talked with them about, hey, can we do this a little less frequently, make these meetings a little more meaningful? So they were all amenable to that, and so now we're going to embark on doing that quarterly starting this year.
A change that was made, which was kind of interesting because it was one of the most discussed topics, I would say, in our negotiations, was cell phone reimbursements. We were kind of all over the scale as far as who got them, how much how much were employees getting for them, and in an effort to try to control that and figure out where does the future go from here. What cell phone reimbursement looked like 10 years ago for limited text messages, limited phone calls, it made a bigger difference. Now with everything's unlimited. So there was a ton of discussion back and forth in the negotiation about how this looked. And kind of where it settled was effective January 1st of 23, there was going to be no new cell phone reimbursements for any employee. So we were going to grandfather in anybody that had them, but moving forward, there were going to be no new cell phone reimbursements. So then the discussion turned to what about employees that use their cell phones for work? How does this look? So we've created somewhat a cell phone policy to kind of address that. You know, there's going to be certain employees that, regardless if you're getting the reimbursement or not, you'll be expected at times to answer calls, respond to emergencies, dispatch, whatever it is. There are positions such as police, the sergeants, the squads that will be given city-issued phones for those uses. But moving forward, there won't be any new cell phone reimbursements that were given out. So in an effort of designing the policy, we've also designed a waiver that now addresses some of those things. Before, we haven't had employees sign off on a waiver, you know, understanding that if it's an hourly employee and they access work information outside of work hours, that's not subject to overtime. So before, we have nothing to regulate that. Now they're going to sign off stating they understand that. They can't put down on their timesheet, I clocked in and checked my pay, and so I think I should be entitled to some overtime. And then it also has some legal terms in there about what the responsibility is, what the city's responsibility is towards that phone if there would be an issue with it.
I think, too, one of the other things that's important to talk about here is some of the employees said, okay, I'm fine not having a cell phone reimbursement. You know, I have an unlimited plan or whatever. I want to use my cell phone. It's convenient. And we get that. You know, you can go back to your truck and get on the radio, but if you're out in the field, it might be convenient. So, you know, we're going to allow that, but the employee will understand that that's their own responsibility then. And if they drop their phone in Martin Creek, and it's, you know, it's their responsibility, and we're not going to buy a new iPhone if you're choosing to use it for your convenience. The other thing, too, is lots of discussion about those of us who are kind of always on call all the time, you know, and kind of working, I don't want to say 24 hours a day, but could potentially be working at odd hours. We talked round and round about that and landed on the fact that, you know, there were salaried employees prior to cell phones, and we all existed prior to that. And at that time, the city did not reimburse you for your Midco bill or Northwestern Bell or whatever you had. You know, you were expected to use your phone to have those conversations if you needed to have them at home. And so we've looked at that the same way. That made sense to us that, you know, you probably would use your cell phone. That bleeds into technology as well. So, you know, you're going to probably use your internet at home, you know, also. So we try to pay those folks reasonable enough to have some expectation that they'll be able to do their job. And so going forward, we'll make sure that it's in those job descriptions, that they understand that they need to have the technology and be willing to utilize it for the operations of their department, et cetera. So not saying that's the solution that's going to save every problem. We'd like to try this and see how it works. I talk to a lot of cities. How do you handle this? And it's kind of a don't ask a question you don't want the answer to type of answer, because it's uncomfortable for everybody. Some just leave it as salaried employees receive a reimbursement, non-salaried or hourly employees do not. It's not always workable given the nature of the type of work that they do. So the other thing that we want people to understand too is that, you know, when the city's paying portion of your phone, you know, what you do there is partially, you know, could maybe be subject to a subpoena if there's an accident or something like that in the course of your work. And, you know, do they want that? Do the employees understand and want to, you know, be subject to that? So, you know, that's reasonable for example, our detectives or our police sergeant who we issue a phone that in the course of a crime and resulting in court that maybe a cell phone record is requested. That's not something, fortunately, we've had to deal with, but in the world we live in today, it's something that we definitely could. And so I think, you know, having those conversations with the employees has been valuable too, because I think that's a side of technology we don't always think about is, you know, what could happen when we use it too. So wanted to bring that forward as well. And one of the things I really appreciated in this round of union negotiations, with a lot of things we talked about, was, they were small things monetarily, and we both said, Brittany and I both said, as well as the other people negotiating, is this about money, or is this really about the thing? Is it really important, or is it about, dollars? Well, how does it boil down? And fortunately, because of how generous you were able to be, I think that helped in terms of, let's not add a bunch of little things that we have to manage and consider. Let's just, make the salary offer as reasonable as we can for employees. And they were amenable to that. So I appreciated that in our process.
Was there any discussion about, I'm assuming, about use of cell phones while in company vehicles?
Yes.
But I worked for an employer that had a employee commuting to work, making a work phone call with a hands-free device, got in an accident, and successfully won a lawsuit against the employer because they were working while they got in an accident. So I don't know how was that part of the discussion. At that company, we were prohibited from using our phones, personal phones, while commuting to and from work. If we did use them, we were in violation of the policy we signed.
Yeah, so there is safety issues for all cell phone use. So, they're expected to follow the laws, the local, state, and federal laws in regards to those. Let me see. Regardless of the circumstances, employees are required to use hands-free operations or pull off to the side of the road and safely stop the vehicle before placing or accepting a phone call. So yes, that was a lot in the discussion. The same would be text messaging. Mm-hmm.
And I think, too, one of the things with the UKG, even though it took us a long time to get to UKG, we know when people are clocked in as well. And so, you shouldn't really be, if you're an hourly employee, you shouldn't really be conducting business before you're clocked in. And you shouldn't be clocked in when you're at home. You should be at your place of employment or within, however many. We do also want to allow people to utilize that timekeeping technology on their personal device if they should so choose. They can clock in right at their work, where they report to work at their facility. But if they want to have the app, we want to make that convenient. Again, we trust the employees to do the right thing, and so far they have. So that's an option for them as well.
Yeah, and it does state in there, reading or sending text messages while driving is strictly prohibited. So kind of as we continue this discussion with cell phones, we've updated some of our social media policy as far as employees are liable or could be held accountable for comments and posts that they make while on or off duty. So we have kind of a manual of business-like manner. So just because they're off duty doesn't mean that they can kind of wipe their hands and put whatever they want. That there still is an expectation of behavior and content that they're going to post. Now, one of the things that we've added from, it's not in your information, but that came back from the McGrath and North, was that they have several statings where they're saying that nothing in this agreement is intended to restrict communication. So they do have that where they're saying, we're not trying to violate any rights. We're not trying to tell you what you can and can't do. However, we will be monitoring your post, and if something is derogatory or any of that we will be addressing that, regardless if you're posting on or off duty. So adding that information to the social media policy so that employees know that just because they're off the clock doesn't mean that what they post they might not be held accountable for.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to stifle opinions or ideas or anything crazy like that, but to make sure everyone understands we have an expectation for people that work for the city, and we have a reputation that we are proud of and want to uphold, and we want to maintain that character of good character we think we are as an organization, and so that's what we're looking for there.
We've added the tuition reimbursement policy, so that again was an older policy that had not yet been implemented into the personnel manual. So the commission has seen this several years ago, I believe. But this is, again, you can apply to your department head for up to 12 semester hours per year and potentially get credit back money back based on how you complete the class. So if you get an A in the class, you get 100% of the tuition reimbursement. A B in the class is 75% and C is 50%. Below a C, there's no tuition reimbursement for that. There is a requirement to repay if you leave the city within 1, 2, or 3 years, so that this money isn't just going and they're leaving. So that is another part of the tuition reimbursement. So that is something that we have had for some time, but are now just getting it implemented into the personnel manual. It is subject to the department's budgetary constraints. If they haven't budgeted for it, then there might be denial due to budgetary constraints. So. And a couple other just smaller policies that were added. We added a notary policy stating that any equipment that somebody that gets notary with the city, that notary, yes, belongs to them, but any equipment that we provide, they need to give back to us if they leave employment. We've added a key and property policy. So obviously some of those keys that employees have can get people into places that the general public doesn't need to go. So if the key or a computer or a laptop or something is lost or stolen, kind of how does that process look of reporting it and then moving forward with that. Also, having employees understand that there is a level of expectation for how they care for their keys when they're not in the facility, their computers, any property issued to them from the city. And then we added a pets policy. So there has been employees that have wanted to bring pets to work. So now we kind of have a formal policy of how that is followed and then how that is either approved or denied based on several different criteria that they have to go through with that.
If you've been to City Hall, there's a very, ferocious dog named Tess that occasionally comes to work with her owner. And, it hasn't been an issue. In fact, I think it's been a benefit for employees and really enjoyed Tess, especially when we drop a cracker or something on the ground. But, if we have too many in one building, or we would start to have problems, so we wanted to put some guidelines on that. But if you're in City Hall, see if Tess is working. She's on break quite a bit, but.
The last couple things are the list on that second page of that memo are forms that we've updated. So I've heard some requests of people not knowing what to do for different instances. So we've tried to create kind of a standard form for all the different departments so that everybody is filing or giving us somewhat of the similar information collected. So we've had some departments that their employee reviews look very different than other departments. So trying to standardize that. So we're looking at somewhat of a similar guideline across the board. So one of the things, speaking of the reviews, that's one of the things that we've updated. It's been a little bit, there's been some feedback that we're not sure how this will go, so we'll evaluate it along. But now it's kind of a sliding scale, 1 through 7. 4, I guess I should go back. But prior, we had 2 categories. You either meet standards or you don't meet standards. And sometimes that's hard for employees to know, like, okay, I'm meeting standards, but am I being acknowledged because I'm actually going a little above? Or am I meeting standards, but I'm kind of on the lower end of that? I need to pick it up a little bit. So we've adopted one. It's very similar to what they use in the police department, scale of 1 to 7. A 4 is your meeting standards. So it's going to take some understanding from employees that a 4 is meet standards, because you might look at that 4 on the scale and think, wow, I'm not doing a good job, or my supervisor doesn't like me, or whatever the case is. So we're going to be doing some training not only with supervisors, but with employees to understand that that 4 is kind of where you come in at. You either earn the 3 or you earn a 5. You have to, based on your behavior and your actions and your workload and all of that stuff, you either move up or you move down. If you move down at all, there has to be an explanation from the supervisor why, and anything a 6 or higher also has to have an explanation. So the supervisor can't just go through and mark a bunch of 6 and 7s and not have any comments on there. We will go back to them and say, hey, we need to know, like, what is this? Why are they getting these scores? Now, this was something that with the adoption of the amendment from the wage increase amendment that came with the CBA, that the union wants some way to have their employees feel that they're being graded on a way that they know if they deserve a pay increase. kind of
Yeah,
said that very wordy.
Yeah, I think, they want to know how they can improve and where they can improve. And if you're getting meet standards, but you're not getting any additional merit pay, I think they want to be able to have that conversation and to have a visual as to, look, last year I had all 4s in this category. I've gotten all 6s in these categories. Can I request consideration for a merit increase above and beyond what's negotiated? So, previously it was a little bit unclear how that can happen. And so this gives a little bit of ability, and it gives the supervisor the ability to say, well, having looked at the fact that you stayed at at the 4 in all these categories, here's what you would need to do to get to a 5 or a 6 or 7 where you could make those requests.
And I'll just touch on the couple other forms that we've done, the disciplinary action form and then a documented verbal warning form. So right now, if an employee receives a verbal warning, we have no documentation of that. So it's very hard for us as the employer to ever prove that there was ever a verbal warning given. So we do now have a form that employers or that supervisors can fill out. It also gives them a chance to maybe really think about what the conversation is going to be, rather than kind of acting maybe out of haste and delivering something too quickly. Now they have to write it down. They have to have an example. They have to give a description, a follow-up, what part of the CBA or the personnel manual that has been affected by their action, or what are they violating. And so it gives them some time to really think about, is this worth it? Is this what we need to do? And then delivering it in a manner maybe that is a little bit more calm. And then the proof to the employee that it will come now to HR too, so that we do have documentation of that. I think what we've run into is we have employees that have been here for a long time, and you kind of get to the end of the rope and you go and are ready to move through a disciplinary process, and you pull their file and there's nothing, because all they've been given is verbal warnings and it's never been documented. So this is just a way that, not necessarily so that we're moving through the process any quicker of the disciplinary process, but that we're documenting what's happening so we have a better handle on, we can reference those. So that, again, as we work through, talk to some supervisors about that, but with the intention of going to all the departments and meeting with everyone so that we know all of the supervisors are kind of being told the same message on how to handle these and what to do with their employees.
So we're going to leave a little bit of time for you all as commissioners. There's a couple other documents and things that we're adding, but if you have questions for Brittany or I, comments, feedback for us, large amount of work from Brittany and Colleen and Ross on this, and all of us. It's been a long time coming, so we feel really good about the document, but you guys will be asked to act on it. If we're ready, we'll probably bring it back on the 13th.
Are there any more questions for the city manager or Brittany this evening?
The section 400, where it talks about now it's called the probationary period instead of the introductory period. Would we want some consistency then through the rest of the bullet points, since
Yeah.
it seems like that's the...
Yes. Yep,
Okay, so instead of
absolutely.
introductory, for the rest of those, it'll all state probationary.
Oh, did he find a typo? We didn't get it all the way through?
No, just some
Good eye,
consistency
good eye.
stuff.
Yeah, that's we did try to do that where we're using the same language for things. That was needed to be cleaned up too, so.
I have a question in regards to the FMLA. So we had a separate policy, and now it's more or less being incorporated into the handbook/manual in its entirety, essentially, or will we
Yes.
still have a separate? Okay,
We'll
so
move that whole policy into here.
Okay.
And then we'll have kind of this flow chart or this cheat sheet of if you have an employee that comes to you that suggests that they might be out of work for an extended period due to, a variety of different reasons. There's only certain reasons that qualify for FMLA leave, so that then they can be able to understand what those are and get them to HR so that we can get the paperwork going on that.
So then, do you feel comfortable too? I mean, the FMLA has regular updates, essentially, maybe on a fairly regular schedule, I suppose. But is the language that we have in here sufficient enough to also cover anything that might come out already, here this year?
Yes.
That we-
So luckily, the gal that reviewed this has made some updates to other things. She reviewed the FMLA. I didn't receive any revisements for the FMLA policy. So she did go through and she added, a couple things that were put, some other laws that we don't have. So, for example, an immigration law compliance policy. So things like that, where she went through and found, one of the questions I had for her was, are you able to tell us glaring spots that we're missing? Like where are there areas that were not covered at all? But yeah, she did go through the FMLA, and for FMLA, she had no revisions that were necessary.
And in the past, when federal law has changed, Department of Labor has notified us. So we think we, would get notified if we wouldn't happen to hear about it already.
And then we would, at some point, update the handbook?
Yes, I'm thinking that now we're in a place where the updates can come maybe more frequently, and there'll be less overhaul and more just touching up.
I just want to say thank you for all the work you've done on the handbook. It sounds like you've done quite a bit. The question I did have about the sliding scale, being 7 being the highest for the employee performance review, is that pretty clear? I know the police department has used it. Does that seem 10 is not better, 7 is good?
It's so far, I believe that the police department have had success with it, and we have it's very clear on there, like what your rating scale is. So you're consistently below your position requirements. You're sometimes below your position requirements. And then on each category that you're getting scored on, there's a paragraph of what does this look like? What are we looking at? Are they coming to work on time? Are they showing up with a good attitude? And all of kind of what they're looking at. So again, this is our first year, the first time that we'll use it. So as I've talked to managers about, this is something we'll evaluate, and maybe we'll find categories that aren't productive for our employees to learn from and that managers maybe don't like to score on because they just don't feel like they're making a difference in their actions and behaviors at work. So maybe we can replace those, or maybe we're going to switch them out every couple years. So now you're able to see, are there other areas that either I need to work on, or I'm doing great on, or maybe isn't moving the needle much when we talk about performance.
And now that we have as much depth as we do in the human resources and employee engagement, Brittany and Colleen have been good about talking to supervisors, particularly first-time supervisors, because we have a tradition of, hey, if you're a really good worker, you'll be a really good supervisor, but we're not going to give you all the tools, all the training. That's changed now. And so just last week, Brittany and I met with a department. We talked through some of the, like, hey, how do you deliver a disciplinary action? How is that? What does that conversation look like? How do you make sure you get back to the point? How do you do a performance review? How do you deliver news constructively to people? How do you have a conversation rather than here's a list of all the things, Mike, you've done wrong in 2022, more of a discussion throughout the year, and so that the review is a culmination so there aren't surprises. That's not the goal of the review. The goal of the review is to grow the employee. So I think that now reorganizing HR the way we have some resources for people too that are expected to fill out these forms and follow these policies, and they're not as much on their own anymore. And quite frankly too, not all the departments have the time. Probably none of the departments have all the time they need. They need that support, and that's what human resources is there, is the resources for our humans. So I guess that's why they call it that.
I have a follow-up question about longevity pay. Continuous years of service, has that always been the case with the personnel manual? That we've stated it outright, it has to be continuous years?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
That's what was negotiated, I believe, back in '08 with the first AFSCME contract. If anyone has more history than that and can say if it's been anything different than that. We have had employees that leave service and then they come and then they say, oh, yeah, the city of Yankton is a great place to work, and then they've come back, but we start that clock over again.
That'd be something I'd be interested in perhaps revisiting at some point, simply because it would seem to be maybe a cool thing about Yankton is, we understand that in today's economic environment, and sometimes too with, let's say, a spouse might get a job opportunity someplace else, and then an employee of ours goes along. But if they do come back to our area, the thought might be that I've got my 10 years in at Yankton. If I do decide I could go back to Yankton and restart my position there and pick up where I left off, it might be, again, just considering the climate that we're in, and probably will be for many years to come, it could be something that might differentiate us, and hopefully we can get back quality employees who choose to leave for one reason or another, and understand that there's open doors here and an opportunity to continue their employment with us.
Yeah, that's something we can definitely look at. It is a negotiated item, and we can bring that up at our next negotiation. I don't think anyone would be opposed to that. Doesn't happen frequently, but maybe will as people become more mobile.
Any more questions? All right. Good feedback. Thank you, everyone, for helping to modernize our employee handbook. It creates more clarity for our leaders, our employees, and makes us a stronger organization overall. So with that, we have no other business on the work session agenda. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. This meeting is adjourned until we meet again at 7 o'clock for our regular session.